This is Sal Coladonato from The Slant, and you're listening to the BS Podcast Network.
You're smaller than I remember.
Whereas I barely remember you at all.
Strange. For me, it feels just like yesterday. Are you surprised?
Not particularly. But then you always were a slippery one.
Maybe that's why you liked me so much.
You flatter yourself.
Oh, no remorse. Just as I had imagined.
Regret is unprofessional.
Regret is unprofessional. They kept me for 5 months in a room with no air. They tortured me. And I protected your secrets. I protected you. But they made me suffer. And suffer. And suffer. And then I realized it was you who betrayed me. You betrayed me. So I had only one thing left. My cyanide capsule in my back left molar. You remember, right? Do you know what it does to you? Hydrogen cyanide? Look upon your work, Nolan.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Who are you?
My name is Bond. I'm Batman. Name's Bond. James Bond. I'm Batman. Bond. James Bond. I'm Batman. I'm Batman.
This is the Batman vs. James Bond show. The show covering everything related to Batman and James Bond movies. And now, here's your host, Brian Thomas.
Welcome, everyone, to an all-new episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. The name's Thomas, Brian Thomas, and I am your host. And this is the show where we discuss everything related to Batman and James Bond movies. It's great to be back. I hope all of you have had a fantastic week. Mine was excellent. Little out-of-town getaway. Yes, spending 6 to 8 hours in a car with my lovely wife and my 2 oversized rat dogs. Yes, that's right. No, I don't have a Blofeld cat. I have 2 dogs instead. And no, they're not the dogs from Moonraker. They're way sweeter than that. But got out of town. For those of you in the States, you've heard of a little place called the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and I head down there. And normally you would think going down the beach would be, it would be perfect weather to go down the beach. It's almost summertime, right? No, it was nothing but rain and kind of cool weather, but we made the most out of it, and plenty of Heinekens and martinis and whatever else, and we made the most out of it. It was a great time, so hope everybody else had a great week. As I always start off the show saying, lots and lots to get to. And you would think I get tired of saying that. You think I'm just kind of feeding you a whole bunch of, as Roger Moore would say, there's a 4-letter word and you're full of it. Well, honestly, Roger, I am not full of anything because I do have news, believe it or not. And as I was even talking about on the live stream right before I started the show, it's like when I started the show, I'm thinking, okay, well, Batman and James Bond, well, they're always going to be in the news somehow, some way. And nor did I expect to have this amount of news every week, though, sometimes, because I'm thinking, okay, well, there's going to be some times where there's not so much news, kind of dry and so forth. And, well, it's not one of those weeks. It's awesome. I'm actually excited about it, and I know you are too, because you probably have a feeling, if you follow me on social media or you've been listening to the news, what I'll be talking about. Excuse me. But before we jump into things, just a reminder, BatmanVSBond.com. That's right. You know the name. It doesn't have a number, but you can go there for all the latest shows and more content. That's right. As I mentioned last time, episodes tab, click right on it. Every single episode from the Batman vs. James Bond show archive is there. Lucius Fox and Q Branch have teamed up together to bring that to you. And you know what? It's a fine piece of quality entertainment. All 60, well, this will be 62, so all the rest of the 61 episodes out there for your listening pleasure. Always catch up. That's the great thing about podcast format. You can, and as I did this week, I'm like listening to, other podcasts and my show, maybe too. I already listened to last week's episode, and yes, I listened to my own episode. But besides the point, you can always take them wherever you go if you're going on vacation, because it is that time of the year. And, like I always say, YouTube is in the works. It's going to be happening. Stay tuned for that. I won't tease that too much, but I will say you can also find the Batman vs. James Bond show on the BS Podcast Network. That's bspodcastnetwork.com. Find my show and a whole bunch of other shows on there. Now, let's get down to business. All right. Well, where do we start? As the saying goes, where do we begin? Well, we will begin. Actually, that's actually a good Nolan reference right there, Joker. So let me paint you a picture here. Last week, just got finished recording the episode, and I'm like, I need a break because, just trying to record twice last week, when you guys never knew about that. But besides the points, I'm like, okay, well, nice little break, kind of put the show together, by the weekend, and, we'll see what happens. Little did I know that a news story was going to be dropping, and it was going to be all over the interwebs, and it was titled Christopher Nolan and Bond 25. I'm like, come on, no, it's not going to be happening. No way. This must be like a post-April Fool's joke or something. No, because we're actually in May, and no, this turned out to be true from everything I've seen anyway. This was reported on Collider.com. This was reported on let's see, James Bond Live on Twitter. mi6hq.com, very credible James Bond source out there also. And so what happened is last week, the Bond 25 fan Twitter noticed that Christopher Nolan's production company, Syncopy, for those of you that haven't heard that name, that's okay. Christopher Nolan's had this production company for quite a while. Produced all the Dark Knight trilogy. He also did outside of Batman, he did Interstellar, Inception, The Prestige, all those movies. And Syncopy was listed on IMDb Pro as a producer for the film. So, of course, this led to everybody losing their minds. As I said, is it Christopher Nolan directing a James Bond movie? Is this really, really happening? And I'm thinking, no, this can't be true. I mean, usually I like to be optimistic about this, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if they're trying to get Daniel Craig back, and at the same time, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but if they're trying to get Daniel Craig back, and they're in the middle of a bidding war between MGM and Eon Productions about who will control this Bond franchise, or who will be the distributor for Bond 25, then they're really jumping the gun here with this, because that would mean a whole bunch of things. But before I get into that, like I said, it was already taken down, and since then there's been no word. Of course, much speculation, as I might be doing here tonight, and of course that's what you would expect from a Batman versus James Bond show. Needless to say, though, like I said, MGM and Eon right now, they're still looking for a distributor for Bond 25. Like I mentioned on probably about 2-3 episodes ago, Warner Brothers is on the list of interested studios to acquire the next distribution rights for Bond 25. Now, what does that mean? Well, to recap super quick, what happened is that MGM's contract, or Sony's contract with MGM to be the distributor for those films, is it's expired, and now they want to they're shopping around just for a one shot, as they would call it, one chance to produce a Bond movie. And I guess if all goes well, in the eyes of MGM and Eon, then they'll end up doing more with that. Now, like I said, you had 20th Century Fox, you had Warner Brothers, I think Universal was on the list. There's I always forget the name. It's not Artisan. It's something like that anyway. It's the company that produced Zero Dark 30 and American Hustle. Besides the point, though, Warner Brothers, like I said, that would be my main pick, because they are one of the biggest studios out there. Yes, they do hold the Batman rights, and I would it's not because they have the rights to Batman, it's not because they're distributed for that, it's besides that. I said, when it comes to this, I get a little nerdy, because I'm not saying I base a film strictly on a production company, on a distributor, on a studio. That's not entirely true, but I do know that, Warner Brothers has that reputation for doing some really good movies. Now, if you want to say, Brian, the DCU, I mean, come on, the Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, are you serious? Well, okay, not everybody's going to have their good days, and despite the fact that both those movies did make money, they knew exactly how to market them. They know damn well how to market a movie. You always see lots of trailers, you always see lots of TV spots, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about marketing. So it was never a question about those movies being marketed the right way. It comes also down to, will the studio let the filmmaker make their own movie? And right now, it's kind of like, well, with DCU, not so much. With a Bond movie, though, say this were to happen, and this would be Christopher Nolan. Nolan has a long history, as I had already mentioned, about working with Warner Brothers Studios. Obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar, The Prestige, his new one that's going to be coming out, Dunkirk. Aside from the fact, though, see the trailer for the newest trailer for Dunkirk looks amazing. Nolan has that rapport with Warner Brothers, so I'm thinking, okay, this would make sense, because one, you have Warner Brothers on the list of interested studios in acquiring, the distribution rights for James Bond, and who doesn't want that? You have Christopher Nolan, who works with Warner Brothers already. They pretty much give him whatever amount of money. I'm just kind of making this up. It might not be far from the truth, though. They would give him however much money he needs. And, they know in Nolan, we trust. And in Nolan, they probably trust, too, to make a good movie because they know, he is one of the best filmmakers out there. And, right now with what's going on with James Bond and not knowing if Daniel Craig is returning, if we are going to get a reboot, that's my biggest concern right now. It's not a question of if this would really happen. I would say I would, as they said online, take it with a grain of salt. I honestly don't think this is going to happen. I really don't. The only way I think this would happen is if Nolan would if James Bond's getting a complete reboot, if for some small chance Daniel Craig does return, then I don't think Nolan's going to want to take over somebody else's, franchise. It seems like he's the kind of guy or the sort of director, writer that likes to work, create his own project from scratch. And then obviously what he did with the Dark Knight trilogy, tell a story from the beginning all the way to the end. He doesn't want to pick up the end, the last part. He doesn't want to pick up a sequel in a movie. I don't think that's his style. So if that's the case, then if Bond 25 would have Daniel Craig, I don't think that's going to happen. But let's just say that some small chance that, they decide, it would make sense that if a studio is going to acquire, this goes back to, a studio acquiring MGM Eon Productions, the James Bond distribution rights, then they probably, from what I understand, then that yes, they're going to want to have a say, but MGM and Eon are the ones that are going to have the final say in this. So there probably will be negotiations. I'm only speculating here, guys, because at the end of the day, I'm just a fan, but I'm more of a movie news obsessed kind of fan. And a lot of you guys probably are. You might know more than I do. But besides the fact, though, I'm giving my insight on this. So I can tell that Christopher Nolan is definitely a fan of James Bond. I was thinking of some of the references today of, Bond references he made just in the Dark Knight trilogy. The most obvious is just Bruce Wayne. His Bruce Wayne especially, carried himself more like James Bond, I think, than, the previous, like say a Michael Keaton iteration would have, or even the Val Kilmer and George Clooney. Won't talk about that anymore. Just how the globetrotting, as they said, just all the different locations that he took, Bond and Bruce Wayne, I always say, if we're making that comparison, they have that kind of a Playboy image. The suits, just how everything was with Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox. That was more like a Q and James Bond kind of thing. How Bruce Wayne would go down to Lucius Fox's, to his R&D labs. And he, for example, in The Dark Knight, if he's playing with the new gauntlets and he pushes the button, he's like, and Lucius Fox says, maybe you want to, read the instruction manual first, that kind of thing. And always that relationship they had was very evident of a Q and James Bond. It's almost kind of like, okay, well, it's filling in the voids for every time we didn't have a James Bond movie, and I'm cool with that. The Joker in The Dark Knight, once again, with his shoe, he had a shoe knife in there. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, that's from Russia with Love. Aside from being, was it poison tipped or whatever, Colonel Klebb, she had the same kind of style shoe in there. So I think that was definitely a homage to that. Skyhook in Shanghai in The Dark Knight, that was definitely another reference in there. When Bond is getting Mr. Lau from LSI with Holdings, he does the whole, the cargo plane picks him up. It's straight out of Thunderball. It really is out of Thunderball. And that happened all the way in 1965? Yeah, 1965 is when Thunderball came out. And I'm like, that's another James Bond reference because I've seen something exactly like that. And then in The Dark Knight Rises, in the pre-title sequence, that was almost taken from... I'm not saying he's ripping off. I think, like I said, he's paying homage to it. When Bane is, doing his, escape in midair, and, his thugs, put the cable around the plane, that is such a homage to License to Kill. When Bond did the same thing with Coast Guard chopper and Fran Sanchez's little plane, when they hooked it on, he's like, let's go fishing. Same idea there. So it's not a question, if I would ever want Christopher Nolan to direct a James Bond film, I've always been a big supporter of that. I think the closest thing we've ever gotten to, and I might have mentioned on the show before, that the closest director we've ever had to directing a James Bond film that's like Nolan in the style of it is clearly Sam Mendes, especially Skyfall. And we've talked about the comparisons between Skyfall and Dark Knight. I won't get into that tonight. But I will say that, if this ends up being true, I mean, maybe they I'm trying to figure out why somebody would just put that on all of a sudden and then take it off. Honestly, I don't think IMDb, and I was saying this online on a couple posts, that people were, saying, oh, what if this is true? This has got to be true. IMDb is not one of those, its reputation is that, it's not the kind of one to break news stories and to always be 100% positive, to be 100% accurate, if you will, when it comes to news, when it comes to certain things. So Bond 25 could be listed, for all we know, for 2018. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, guys. It really doesn't mean it. I know, because I've followed lots and lots of movies on there before, and I'm thinking, oh, well, for example, we could get, the next Batman, that was listed probably for 2018. Guess what? That's not on there anymore. And, for some small chance, if, Nolan was listed on there, doesn't mean it's going to happen positively. So, and I was also saying this about IMDb, and I'm guilty of this also, about posting my review, or posting a review, or posting my score, at the very top. If you've been on IMDb before, you can go on there and rate a movie, and it does, like, it's different from a Rotten Tomatoes because it's user friendly, and anybody can go on IMDb and just put something on there. So in a sense, it's kind of like a Wikipedia where somebody can just add something on there, and that's why I'm taking this very cautiously, saying, yeah, if it was on there, then it doesn't mean that it's true. We can continue to hope and pray, if you are a Nolan fan and if you want this to happen. I know that a lot of people are saying that they would love to see this happen. Like I said, I'm on the bandwagon. I'm on the Nolan bandwagon for sure, because I know, I can tell, like I said, he's a fan of James Bond, and, I know what he can do with a character-driven story and then throw in some action in there. And I think he would definitely be a top choice to do it, but I don't even know what his next projects are after Dunkirk. I know he's very picky about his projects, considering he can practically do whatever he wants to. So does he want to be tied down for another one of these stories? Say, like, I would say James Bond is a superhero, okay? Whatever you want to say, he is a superhero because he pretty much never dies, even though he doesn't have superhuman powers, just like Batman. So if Nolan would do this, would he want to do just one movie, or does he want to even be tied down with something like this again? I would say that the closest one, also closest James Bond style movie he's ever done is Inception. I, for one, am a huge fan of Inception. I love Inception. Combine, all the set pieces and all the, the style of it. Just it was so reminiscent of a James Bond movie in a way. And the music in there. That's another thing that people are saying. Well, if you get Christopher Nolan, you get Hans Zimmer, and I'm like, yes, please. I love Hans Zimmer. I'm going to see him in concert this July, and I'm dragging my wife to it. And I love Hans Zimmer scores. To hear a Hans Zimmer James Bond theme, shut up and take my money. Absolutely. But like I said, this is something that as they say, take with a grain of salt. It's not confirmed. It's just something that was put up and then taken down. If I had to be a betting man, I don't think that this is going to happen. And you know what? I hope I'm wrong. I really, truly hope I'm wrong. But, I mean, to grab Christopher Nolan, which is Christopher Nolan, as they say, is like one of those directors that you hear the name and you just want to see the movie because his reputation precedes him. So maybe this can happen. I mean, they were able to snab a big director like Sam Mendes. So if they can get Nolan, then kudos to Eon Productions, kudos to Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, because, it was worth the wait. If, hopefully, if this all does end up panning out. So stay tuned. More news to come. All right, let's move on here. Ben Affleck. Yes, Ben Affleck is, we haven't heard much from Ben Affleck aside from, the Justice League. Is he going to be, the question still remains, is he going to be Batman after the Justice League? So when I say that, I'm saying, well, Matt Reeves signed on to direct, and he said he wants to do his own kind of Batman trilogy, and it's always been a question of if Ben Affleck's going to be returning. Now, I remember when Matt Reeves signed on, Ben Affleck tweeted out, "Welcome to the family, welcome to the Batcave," something along those lines. So to me, that says, oh, okay, Ben Affleck is going to be returning, and we're going to get to we're going to get to see like more his solo Batman movie, which is something I think we should have had long ago. I know I always say that. So per comicbook.com and Heroic Insider, a guy by the name of Humberto Gonzalez, who is a noted DC Comics insider, stated that Ben Affleck has started a new training regimen to get him ready for the Batman. Quoted, "Ben Affleck, Batman. I just got word that he just started training again for the role. You know how there was talk that he was going to leave and he might leave the role? Nah, bro." Yeah, I actually said that on the show. "Nah, bro. He's working out. He's getting back in shape." Once again, take this with a grain of salt. Just because somebody's working out, doesn't mean that, he's trying to get in shape of Batman. Who doesn't want to be in Batman shape? Of course. I want to be dragging those tractor tires just like he was and doing those pull-ups with the weights underneath my legs. But no, instead I'm sitting here and I might be having an adult beverage, especially on the weekends. But hey, if this ends up being true, it does make sense because, if after Matt Reeves wraps up with his War for the Planet of the Apes movie, I would assume that he's going to be concentrating specifically on nothing but Batman. So, and maybe he's already been kind of, putting together a script. We have no idea. That's another thing. We have no idea what's going on with the script for this Batman movie. We haven't heard a thing because there's so much going on right now. There's Justice League. Matt Reeves is still finishing up the last part of his project with the Planet of the Apes movie. So, like I said, if he's getting in shape, that's great. I mean, of course, to be in that kind of shape for Batman, if you saw Batman v Superman, then you would understand. Yeah, you want to be pretty jacked if you want to take on Superman and whomever his next villain's going to be. So, once again, I'd like to know what you guys have to think about this. Do you want to see Ben Affleck return as Batman again? Or do you think, okay, after Justice League, let's get another Batman? Or more or less, would you like to see, this is something I wouldn't mind seeing, is just, kind of one-shots, and I kind of compare this to the Star Wars universe of, okay, if they want to have their regular, episodes of, the Skywalker saga, if you will, of Star Wars movies, that's cool. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if they want to do their whole Justice League thing, that's cool. but at the same time, they're doing movies like, say, Rogue One, which we'll talk about in a second. But if they do their own just solo Batman movies, and it has nothing to do, they can have another Batman. That might cause confusion, though, having two Batmans at the same time. I still think that it might not be such a bad idea for them to do something like that, but, let me know what you have to think. Do you want to see Ben Affleck be Batman again? Why not, right? Okay. So let's move on here. Speaking more of the Batman, so... and I did mention Star Wars, and yes, you're still listening to a Batman versus James Bond show. Sometimes I mention other movies in there. That's okay, right? There's a composer out there. Like I said, all kinds of little things haven't even been started with the Batman yet. All it is they have a director, and they're rewriting the script. Who knows who's writing the script right now? But, of course, people want to kind of stir up the pot and say, oh, well, what do you think about this? So... Per BatmanNews.com, recently, the premiere for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, a composer by the name of Michael Giacchino. Now, Michael Giacchino is known best for his scores for Mission Impossible 3, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Star Trek. He did Star Trek. I know he did Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness. I believe he did Star Trek Beyond also. He did Rogue One, a Star Wars story. See, there's your other Star Wars reference there. And he'll be doing the new Spider-Man Homecoming. I know, blasphemy, how dare you mention a Marvel movie on this show? I just did. That's okay, right? So, Giacchino was asked if he'd like to write the music for a Batman movie, and what did he say? But of course. Yeah, it depends on who's making it and who's involved, but yeah, I would love to. I love Batman. And guess who's directing it? Director Matt Reeves, who also collaborated with Michael Giacchino on Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes. So you put two and two together there, and, history has shown that if a director works with a composer, cinematographer, whomever, chances are they like to continue their relationship with them and bring them along, kind of have their crew come along for the next film. So we've seen that, obviously, as I mentioned, with Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer, with Sam Mendes and Thomas Newman. So would this surprise me if Michael Giacchino does a Batman score? I'm for it. I am. At the same time, I'm nervous because all those movies I've mentioned, those are movie franchises that, kind of already had their own sound. Mission Impossible has one of the most distinct, obviously I know where I stand with the James Bond theme, but Mission Impossible also has one of those distinct themes, and it has an amazing theme song, dun 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 dun. And Giacchino, if you've seen the movies, if you've heard his scores, then he heavily relies on the classic Mission Impossible theme. Same with Star Trek. Themes were already created with this. Rogue One, yes, you already had the Star Wars theme, which was created by the great John Williams. With a Batman score, though, what is he going to do? Is he going to borrow off Danny Elfman? Is he going to borrow off Hans Zimmer? I hope not. I really don't, because I'd like to have this new Matt Reeves Batman. I'd like to have its own distinct sound, if that makes sense. I wanted to have its own score. So that's what worries me with Giacchino, is that it's not that he can't compose great music, because he can. He's already had themes, that he can work off of. With this, he's going to have to do from scratch. And the Rogue One score, I don't remember it so well. I mean, I remember a few themes in there, but nothing that was just like, oh, well, I want to go buy that soundtrack right away. The other ones I already have, and I love them. I really do. But like I said, those are themes that were already created. So what do you think about this, as always? Would you like to see Michael Giacchino score a Batman movie? I think it makes sense if they already have a director relationship. Sure, why not? But I want to see him, be more creative with this, if you will. It's not like a James Bond theme where you have a distinct James Bond theme and you can use that, like, Newman's, done his own sound to it. David Arnold's done his own sound to it. John Barry obviously is the godfather of, creating, working with the James Bond scores. Monty Norman was the creator who wrote the James Bond theme. But we've also had Bill Conti in there. I know I'm nerding out over music scores, I know, and I'm going to continue doing that right away now. there is a documentary that just was announced, well, not announced, but the trailer was just released for it. It's called Score, a film music documentary, and it's directed by a guy named Matt Schrader. He's a former newsman for CBS. Now, what this is exactly what you would think it is. It's a film that offers a look at the art and impact of film composers. So you saw how I was just geeking out over film scores, and guess what? I'm going to really be geeking out right now about this, because this documentary is, while everybody else is out seeing the summer blockbusters, and believe me, I'll be one of the guys out there, standing in line for it. But at the same time, come this June, I will definitely be one of the few probably that'll be standing in line, just to go see this movie, because this documentary, because I got to say, this looks really, really good. So what this is it's going to give an inside look at how the film scores get composed, how they've evolved over the decades, and where the medium is right now. Some quotes from this. Music is the one thing that we all understand and we don't understand. Music has tremendous driving power in the narrative of any clip or any film. And then what do? They're showing, as this trailer is going on, they start off with kind of like the E.T. theme with a very young Steven Spielberg and John Williams kind of showing, and it's John Williams showing him on the piano of how he's kind of saying, hey, what do you think about this theme for your movie? And Spielberg loved it. And then they fall into this music has a tremendous driving power in the narrative of any film. And then what do you see? That's right. You cue the Dr. No Bond, James Bond. And, they're talking about that. So, of course, I'm sold already. They're talking about James Bond and, how the effect that it has. They said, score is the heartbeat of the film. It's like a chemical high. I, for one, can attest to that. They mentioned the Bond theme, the E.T. theme, the Social Network theme. They said how the Dark Knight theme, that was created by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard, it revolutionized music scores. Thomas Newman is being interviewed in there. Danny Elfman is in there, saying it's a new renaissance. There's also interviews, once again, with John Williams, Trent Reznor, Hans Zimmer is interviewed in here, James Cameron. Like I said, I'm going to see Hans Zimmer for the first time this summer, and I'm super excited because I know he does perform his Dark Knight score in there. He does the Joker theme. He does the Bane theme in there, and they do the Wonder Woman theme in there, and say what you will about Batman v Superman, the score in there, it's awesome. It really is awesome. I used to do a thing where I would buy the score for a movie before I would see the movie, and it almost kind of spoiled it for me, so I stopped doing that. So now I just, I might listen to a few clips that they happen to come out. With the Wonder Woman theme, I heard that before the movie, and I'm like, this theme is sick. It is literally sick. It's that good. And to hear that it's such a weird sound. But whenever I hear that song, think of two things. I think of Wonder Woman. I think of, her, getting ready to battle Doomsday. And then I think of my wife, because that's actually her ringtone. True story. And like I said, everything about a music score, and I don't know how many of you are as big a fan of music scores. I mean, I know that, from the first time that I heard the James Bond theme to the Danny Elfman Batman theme, I know I've been hooked on those themes for a long time. Actually, the first James Bond score that I bought was Tomorrow Never Dies, and that was the first one written by David Arnold, and it's a great mix-up. It's probably actually one of his best scores that he did for the James Bond franchise. I love Thomas Newman's sound. I know I'm a big fan of him. What he's done with that, he's kind of remixed it in a different way. Obviously Hans Zimmer, I'm a huge fan of. So this is something that if you're a fan of music scores, I really encourage you to check this out. It'll be opening in theaters June 16th. I don't know if it's going to have a limited release or what, but like I said, if you want to get a good background, or from what they're showing us, if you want to get a good background on how music scores really affect movies and, what they really do to, if you hear a theme, like the Danny Elfman Batman theme, dun, 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 dun. It just puts you in that mood. And and when I heard Chemical High, I'm like, yes, that makes me want to just drive fast. That makes me want to go run and just think that I'm taking on Spectre or whatever. And it's, like I said, I'm a geek about this. What can I say? So let's move on here before I geek out anymore, but I guess I'm going to geek out a little bit more anyway, but this is something a little different. Yeah, let's talk about the Wonder Woman Week 1 update. All right. So, yeah, lots and lots of things surprise me these days. And one thing that really surprised me this past week, and mind you, we just got finished the week 1. At the time of recording, just finished up week 1, getting ready to start week 2, but it's still round 1. And like I said, there's a total of 60 girls, 28 matches for just round 1 before we even start getting into the real meat and potatoes of this. So I knew that, the matchups were going to be kind of, people, I thought that more people were going to be like, oh, well, this is going to be the clear winner just because and what have you. But no, that wasn't the case. This was more like, oh, well, we might have some interesting challenges here. We might have some interesting results here. And, when I was recording last week, I'm not surprised at who won. The first match was Madeline Swan versus Kissy Suzuki. Madeline Swan won, and I was pretty sure she was going to win more because she's more recent, and she's well-known, and a lot of people are fans of Léa Seydoux, as they should be. Madeline Swan won at 73% to Kissy Suzuki, 27%. Like I said before, Kissy Suzuki, she was in You Only Live Twice, but she didn't have a big role, and it's not one of those names of Bond girls that you hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, she's my favorite Bond girl. When I think of You Only Live Twice, I always think of Aki. No, we haven't had that match yet. But, I would say that, that's a fair choice for that. So Madeline Swan does advance. Now, the next one I thought was going to be, I kind of saw coming, but I just wanted to see what was going to come of this. It was Corinne Dufour versus Tiffany Case. Now, Corinne Dufour, as I mentioned, is the second tier. And like I said, going back to that, for those of you just joining me on the show, there's 2 tiers of Bond girls, as I would say. There's the first tier, which is usually the higher billed, or higher paid actress of the film, and then the one that has more limited screen time, which would be the second tier. Corinne Dufour was in Moonraker, and she had a small but memorable part in there. And I was watching Moonraker over the weekend, and because I just, after doing all this, I'm like, well, Corinne Dufour, you know what? I want to go back and revisit Moonraker because I'm packing. And I don't want to get too interested in a movie, but I can just know that I can turn on Moonraker and I can just, have some laughs. I can kind of enjoy it for what it is, and then that's that, and I can move on with the rest of my night. And I'm watching the Corinne Dufour parts, and I'm like, yeah, I can see why a lot of people were fans of her. I really can. She just had that sweet kind of, elegant kind of international beauty to her. And, not by any surprise, Corinne Dufour did end up beating Tiffany Case at 67% to 33%. Tiffany Case is, once again, one of those Bond girls that, I got nothing against her. I don't. I know that when I turn on Diamonds Forever, she's really funny. She's got that, she's spunky. She really is spunky. If that's a word to classify for her, I would say she's spunky. And, she's, knows, she talks back at people, and she kind of has that attitude, that fiery attitude. Yes, maybe because she's redhead. I don't know. But I kind of saw Corinne Dufour winning, and she is the clear winner of this. So, the next one, though, is, I didn't think it was going to be a shutout, but it ended up being a shutout. This one is going to be, actually, you know what? It wasn't a shutout. I'm sorry. It was almost a shutout anyway. This one was Solitaire from Live and Let Die versus Wei Lin from Tomorrow Never Dies. Name me one person that really isn't a fan of Jane Seymour out there, especially Bond film fans. Yeah, pretty much everybody is. And Miss Solitaire, took Wei Lin to town. She really did. 93% to 7%. Wow. Like I said, it might as well have been a shutout. Wei Lin, one of those Bond girls that just, maybe people, don't want to see a Bond girl that's an equal to James Bond. I have no idea. That's not the case with me. I have no problem with that. I want to see another girl kicking some ass with James Bond. I like seeing that, as a matter of fact. I don't always want to see a damsel in distress, but Solitaire is a damsel in distress, and Roger Moore did trick her, and I don't know if Sir Roger had a vote in this, but I know there's definitely fans of her, and Solitaire is the winner and advances to the next round. So moving on here, the next match was Strawberry Fields versus Rachel Dawes. Now, I know, that there are fans out there of Gemma Arterton, who played Strawberry Fields in Quantum of Solace. As I mentioned on the last show, while Strawberry Fields, her character in Quantum of Solace had probably one of the shorter Bond girl or second tier Bond girl roles in a Bond film, I would, her screen time is what I'm trying to say is, it was limited because it was one of the shortest Bond movies. I think it clocks in at maybe an hour 40, hour and 45, give or take. But her personality or her role was so memorable because she was so cute and charming in a way. Just, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And it's still my favorite quote from her. I really enjoy that about her. And then you have Rachel Dawes, and this is the Katie Holmes Rachel Dawes. And, there's Katie Holmes fans out there, and I'm finding out there's, not so many Maggie Gyllenhaal, which we'll talk about in another episode. But, I would think that because a lot of people are fans of Batman Begins, I thought that Rachel Dawes would get a little bit more love. Not the case. Strawberry Fields came in as the winner at 67% to Rachel Dawes at 33%. This is where you guys, like I said, start to surprise me here because there's a lot of fans out there of Gemma Arterton. Maybe people didn't like the portrayal of Rachel Dawes by Katie Holmes. I know there's some fans people that just aren't fans of Katie Holmes. That's okay. To each his own. But personally, I probably would have picked Gemma Arterton in that. I liked her role better than Katie Holmes. That's just me, and obviously you guys did too. Moving on here to this next match. This is one of those matches that I was in shock. I went in here, and like I said, if I had to bet on a sure thing. One, I'm not a betting man. I don't mind throwing around a little bets sometimes if I go to a casino, acting like I'm, Timothy Dalton, playing some blackjack. But if I was to do some roulette, this would be the one where I would just, I would have put all my money on black and think, okay, well, I'm the winner. No. It ended up being Stacey Sutton versus Anya Mosova. Now think about the Bond girls that I'm talking about. Anya Mosova, played by Barbara Brock, one of the best Bond girls we've had out there from The Spy Who Loved Me, versus Stacey Sutton in A View to a Kill, one of the least favorite James Bond films ever, and one of the least favorite James Bond, Bond girls. And who ended up winning? Stacey Sutton at 54%. That's right. Stacey Sutton beat out Anya Mosova at 54 to 46%. I have to ask, and please give me some feedback on this, guys. What happened here? I mean, I didn't think that many people were fans of, Stacey Sutton. I mean, I thought that she was one of those Bond girls that were kind of people thought were annoying or they just didn't like. But there's plenty of votes for this match, and the crowd has spoken. So in an upset win, Stacey Sutton advances. Wow. I mean, I got to say, okay. All right. Moving on here to another interesting match here. Vicky Vale versus Naomi from The Spy Who Loved Me. Now, Vicky Vale, of course, is the beloved, one of my beloved Batman girls, obviously. She was, played by Kim Basinger. I said before, my crush from all the way from when I was a little boy. And, I love Batman 1989, but also when I went back and watched Spy Who Loved Me for the first time, and then I saw Naomi, and then, I was just like, ooh, that's one of memorable Bond girl right there, if you will. And I thought that Naomi would get more love. I really did. But at the same time, of course, here I am in the background rooting, and it ended up being Vicky Vale for the win, 64% to Naomi, 36%. I have no objection to that, of course. The question is, do I see Vicky Vale, making it too much further? It depends on who she's going against. It really does. I know that there's Vicky Vale fans out there like myself. Some of them probably helped us get through puberty, as certain people like Jesus Take the Real had said. Agree with you on that one, Jesus. But yeah, I'd like to see Vicky Vale at least, proceed at least to round, maybe round 3, but I don't think she's going to get too much further than that. Anyway, got to move on here. For the Friday night fights, Friday night fights were back. I love doing these because this is where it really gets interesting. I always try to put the best matchup of the week on there. It was Jinx versus who played by Holly Berry and Diana of the Day versus Mary Goodnight, played by Britt Eklund in The Man with the Golden Gun. Now, both of these are incredibly gorgeous women. Yes. How could you not? You couldn't choose wrong in this. You really couldn't. But if we're looking at the performance as a Bond girl, I said, in giving my 2 cents, I would have said that Mary Goodnight was just, the better Bond girl. I think that, maybe it's because people don't like Diana of the Day. Maybe they didn't like the quotes or the lines from, Holly Berry's Jinx in there. I have no idea. But, it ended up being Mary Goodnight with the win, 62% to 38%. I thought there were going to be more fans of Holly Berry out there just because she is Holly Berry. But nope, Mary Goodnight for the win. So Mary Goodnight proceeds to the next round. Next one here. Melina Havelock versus Cara Milivoy. Wow. I think I said this before in the last show, and it turned out to be true. Boy, does Cara Milivoy have a very quiet but very, very big following out there. You guys voted Cara Milivoy for the win, 78% to Melina Havelock, 22%. Somebody please tell me. And, I have nothing against Cara Milivoy. I think I like Melina Havelock just a little bit better. But please tell me, what is it about Cara Milivoy that you guys love so much? I'm curious why everybody's such a big fan out there. Where is this fan base coming from? Is it because The Living Daylights is one of your favorite Bond movies? Is it because, obviously she's beautiful, but please tell me. So, the next one, and this is the one where I knew that I had to save this for the Saturday night fights because it was just too good to pass up. Now, this one is one that people are going to be just, probably throwing their iPod, throwing their computer across the room because of the results of this. And I must forewarn you that there's going to be a lot of unhappy people with this result. And like I said, I had nothing to do with it. Now, I am just the commissioner of the league. I have no influence. This is not like other sports leagues where the commissioner interferes. No. This is just me. This is automatic. Whatever happens. And this is the match that came up. Eve Moneypenny, played by Naomi Harris in Skyfall and Spectre, versus Tracy Bond from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I'm thinking, okay, well, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the one. A lot of people would consider this one of the best Bond films ever. So clearly, I would think that Tracy Bond would be the one for the win. But you also have more recently Naomi Harris, who was Moneypenny in the last 2 Bond films, and if you've seen Naomi Harris, she is very easy on the eyes. As a matter of fact, she is what would be the word? She is an extremely attractive woman, and I love her in the role of Eve Moneypenny. Just her relationship with Daniel Craig, the shaving, everything in there. Just when he's calling her in the middle of Spectre during the car chase, you have somebody with you at this time of night, little things like that. And she's like, James, it's called a life. You should try it sometime. And I love just everything she's brought to the role. But my bets were that Tracy Bond would be the winner. Nope. That's right. Eve Moneypenny for the win. This was the closest one of the week, and this is why this was Saturday Night Fights, because anything can happen. Eve Moneypenny is the winner, 52% to Tracy Bond at 48%. Biggest turnout that I had of all the polls of all the week. I gotta say, hey, Tracy Bond fans, I'm very sorry for this. I don't know what to say. I was saying, is it those millennials, those millennial Bond fans? I don't know. Maybe they need to go back and watch Under Majesty's Secret Service. Personally, I would have picked Eve Moneypenny. I think I did like Tracy Bond, but I didn't like her as much as Eve Moneypenny. So, and I think Eve Moneypenny is going to be one of those that are going to be around for quite a while now. So, let's look at this week's upcoming matchups here. Like I said, we're still in round 1. It's going to be anybody's game. Anything can happen right now. The next matchups that are going to be happening is Mayday versus Moneypenny, played by Samantha Bond from the Brosnan era of James Bond films. We have, I'm going to save that one for last. Moneypenny, played by Louise Maxwell, versus Holly Goodhead, Dr. Goodhead. Solange Demetrios versus Domino Derval. Miranda Frost versus Poison Ivy, played by Uma Thurman. Xenia on a Top versus Electra King. That's going to be a good one. And I will save this for Saturday Night Fights. That's right, this is going to be the big one. Pussy Galore versus Harley Quinn. And I know that there are fans out there of Miss Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. I myself am definitely probably numero uno fan of her. And I've been waiting for this one, and I can't wait for Saturday night just to post this and to see what the results for this. I almost want to, it's like promoting a fight. I almost want to promote this as much as I can on social media because I want to get the hype for this. And I want you guys to do me the biggest favor. Vote on Twitter at Batman vs. Bond. That's right. The Twitter polls are the only way. That's right. The only way to count that your vote will count. Now, like I mentioned, I will post on social media. I will post on Instagram the pictures, and same with Facebook. I'll post the pictures on there where you can sit, and I'll let you know that the polls will be open. But you have to exclusively vote on Twitter because I haven't found a way to actually do it on there, and I don't really have the time to count up everyone's vote on there. So to get your vote one more time, and I will keep repeating this, again, probably by the end of the show also, for your vote to count, you must vote on Twitter at Batman vs. Bond. If you don't have a Twitter account, just create one. Just create one under for James Bond. God knows there's plenty of them out there. So let's move into birthdays here. The first birthday we have this week is Albert Finney, who played Kincaid in Skyfall. He celebrates a birthday on May 9th. If you haven't seen Skyfall, shame on you. Albert Finney was just one of those nice little surprises at the end of Skyfall. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but I will say that, when it comes to James Bond, James Bond was kind of missing a humor element in Quantum of Solace. It definitely brought it back in Skyfall. And Albert Finney, he's a great actor. He definitely contributed to that little kind of sarcastic kind of humor factor in there. And he was saying, he would make these little remarks in there, and Bond would say, "It's not your fight, Kincaid." And then Kincaid would say, "Try and stop me, you jumped up little shit." Little things like that. And I loved that. I loved how they had that relationship in there. I loved his, kind of flirting with Judi Dench's M. Hello, Emma. Little things like that. So, happy birthday to you, sir. Rosario Dawson from the Lego Batman movie, who played Barbara Gordon in there, celebrates a birthday also on May 9th. I can't say enough good things about the Lego Batman movie, and Rosario Dawson's voice and the personality that she brought out it's a Lego movie, but the personality that she brought out in Barbara Gordon and how it played off Will Arnett it's so well done. Like I said, I'll be dropping that review in the next couple of weeks after the movie gets released on HD. So stay tuned for that, but happy birthday, Rosario Dawson. All right, so let's move into some questions. Catching up from some questions from last week, which I didn't have a chance to get to. I apologize for that. All right, so the first question comes from the Retro Critic. Which Bond villain or henchman would give Batman the biggest challenge in a fist fight? Which Bond villain or henchman would give Batman the biggest challenge in a fist fight? I had a little time to think about this, and I still keep coming back to two names. I would say Jaws, not just because I just recently watched Moonraker, but Jaws seems to have 9 lives. You can drop him from an airplane, you can put him against a shark, and you can put him in a car accident, and somehow he walks away every time. So for that matter, I would say the Jaws versus Batman would probably be it would be a fair fight in there, because I'd love to see how Batman would take him on. It would be kind of like when it comes to physically, Batman, he's, very well trained, but I would say that, Bane did put up one of the best fights that we've seen so far on the big screen. So if you're going to say Jaws, then Jaws can never die. He can be stuck in a space station and he still never dies. So I would say Jaws would be the answer. Thanks. That's a good question. This next one comes from Jake and Tom Conquer. Who'd win in a fight and why? George Clooney from Batman and Robin versus George Lazenby from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Easy one. Hands down, George Lazenby. If you've seen On Her Majesty's Secret Service, then you know what I'm talking about. George Lazenby might be one of my least favorite James Bonds, but boy, could he fight in that movie, or they made him look like he could fight in that movie. And just that extended arm punch that he does is like a sidearm punch or something. He just winds all the way back up and just slams his arm into the bad guy's face. I would see that him doing that to George Clooney, despite if George Clooney is in the bat suit and has all those crazy little gadgets, like a little heater, whatever, a little heater batarang or whatever, or laser batarang, I don't think he's going to win at all. Clooney wasn't in the best shape, I would say. I mean, George Clooney's always in good shape, but I would say Lazenby seemed to have those, have the fighting skills that would take Mr. Bruce Wayne down. But good question. The Poncho section writes, if Batman and Bond had to switch gear for their crime fighting missions, how would each fare against their enemies against each other? All right. Well, if I'm understanding this correctly, I would say, if they're kind of trading places here. Sounds like a cool movie right there. Batman and Bond trading places. If it depends on which one we're talking about here, because we talked about this recently about Pierce Brosnan was offered to be Batman. And if Batman, if Pierce Brosnan was Batman, his James Bond was Batman, it would be kind of interesting because would he be rocking the bat nibbles or not? And what kind of bad guys would he be going against? Would he be going against, like, say, a Two-Face Riddler? Would he be going against Mr. Freeze or Uma Thurman? And I would think that, he would probably I think he'd probably do pretty well as Batman. He has Alfred there. He still has his gadgets. Just like I mentioned about or George Clooney specifically about, physically, he didn't have to be the strongest. He could still be in that bat suit and take on those bad guys. So I think that Pierce Brosnan would be the best Bond to be in a Batman attire. Now, and yeah, I know a lot of people would say, well, what about Daniel Craig being in, like, say, a Dark Knight, kind of James Bond or Batman film? I wouldn't want to see Daniel Craig do a Batman impression. I really, really wouldn't want to. I think he does just fine as Mr. Bond. But if you're having a Batman, I would say, easily, Christian Bale. Christian Bale would do so well as James Bond for the day. The enemies that he would be taking on, I could see him taking on a Lashif. I could see him taking on a Mr. Silva, because he obviously has experience taking on a Joker, so he could be doing that. And he'd be doing what, Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne would always do, questioning if he should continue being James Bond or not. I would, instead of, does it come in black? Does it come in gray? Something like that. I don't know. That was really bad. But besides the point, though, I would like to see something like that. If you're going to put up Pierce Brosnan versus Christian Bale, Bale's going to be the winner, because if you've seen how he does those push-ups, and he can definitely push a bloody log. So I would say he would be the winner for that. Next question here. I know we're short on time. A Beardo Talks Film asked, do you enjoy Tom Hardy's Bane hilariously funny voice and all?
Well, if you're going to ask me about Bane, then I have to do the Bane voice. The fire rises, might I say, and if we're talking about the Bane voice, then it's very much like a Sean Connery meets Tom Hardy kind of voice. Speak in a muffled kind of voice, and I liked the Bane voice. It's more the quotes that took away from it, because not only does the fire rises, but speak of the devil and he shall appear. What a lovely voice I have. That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, I would say that, I like the Bane voice. I think it's just the lines that he was given in there. I think there's just so many quotable lines that I end up laughing every time he says that.
I was wondering what would break first, your spirit or your body.
So I think it's funny, but it's more just because I get a kick out of little things like that. I really do. So, but I think Tom Hardy's Bane voice, there's a true story out there that, when they did like the IMAX released it, probably about like 7 months before The Dark Knight Rises was released in theaters, they did like the whole pre-title sequence and they released it in front of a movie. In December of 2011, I believe it was. And besides the point, though, they had the actual Bane voice that they were going to use, but the complaint was that no one could understand that voice, so they went back and they redid the Bane voice so you could hear him a little bit more clear. And a lot of people are always like, well, how can you hear Bane's voice so clearly when he's on the plane? Were you expecting to get caught?
Of course.
Things like that. So that I'm not saying that takes away from my experience of Tom Hardy's performance as Bane, but it's something I always wish I would have heard the other Bane voice in there. So hope that answers your question. Egon Ling, and this is the last question here, asked, which unused Fleming material would you like to see used in Bond 25? Well, I've gone on record before saying that I have not read all, but I've read only maybe one James Bond book, Ian Fleming novel. So this is going to be a hard one for me to answer, but I will say that from everything I know about You Only Live Twice, it's got a really good story, that from what I understand from the synopsis that I've read, about how Bond goes on a revenge to get Blofeld. Blofeld ends up kind of hiding out, and Bond kind of ends up changing, and there's something about memory loss in there, if I'm not mistaken. I have to do some more research about that, but something like that I would like to see more based off that book. We always say that the Ian Fleming novels are always there. So, and while Roger Moore had a lot of the Ian Fleming novel titles, they weren't always based off the book. So there's always those novels to go back to. So I hope that answers your question. Good questions this week, guys. So that wraps it up for this episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. Please subscribe on Spreaker and iTunes, rate it 5 stars, and leave a nice review for me on there. I would very much appreciate it. The biggest thing that I always ask is that you share this show with your friends, your family, and anyone that is a fan of Batman and James Bond. I always say this, if you know someone who is a fan of Batman film, James Bond films, let them know, hey, guess what? The best of both worlds. That's right, Batman and James Bond all together at one podcast. Follow me on the various social media networks, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Batman vs. Bond. Find the show at batmanvsbond.com and on the BS Podcast Network, and also be sure to check out all the other great programming on there, including Science Faction Podcast, Unpopular Culture Podcast, and Nerds with Words Podcast. And don't forget to buy a t-shirt. Like James Bond, I will return. Until next time, I'm Brian Thomas. Thanks for listening and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.